Hello everyone. Welcome to Azad Revenge Stories channel. Anakar, you're too shy for this role, he said, leaning back in his ergonomic chair, the corner of his mouth twitching like he was trying not to smile. We need someone more outgoing, someone who commands attention. I sat there, hands folded in my lap, the weight of 5 years at this company pressing down on my shoulders. 5 years of staying late, 5 years of perfect performance reviews, 5 years of watching louder, less qualified people get promoted over me. But my numbers are the highest in the department, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I cleared my throat. Tried again. I've increased client retention by 28% since. Numbers aren't everything. Devin cut me off with a dismissive wave. The executive team needs someone who can be the face of the department, someone charismatic, someone like him. He meant someone who spent more time networking in the break room than actually working. Someone who took credit for other people's ideas in meetings while they sat silently, too intimidated to speak up. Someone who wasn't me. I'm giving you 2 weeks' notice, he continued, sliding a folder across his immaculate desk. HR will be in touch about your severance package. My fingertips went numb as I took the folder. The room seemed to tilt sideways. I'd moved to this city for this job. I'd ended a 5-year relationship because my ex wouldn't relocate with me. This job was everything. Is there any way I could move to another department? My voice cracked. God, I hated that it cracked. Devin's expression softened in that practiced way of his. The look he gave when he wanted to seem empathetic, but really just wanted the uncomfortable conversation to end. You know what, Anakar? I think this is for the best. You'll find somewhere that's a better fit for someone like you. Someone like you. The words echoed in my head as I walked back to my desk, past the curious stares of co-workers who somehow already knew. Had he told them before telling me? Of course he had. I packed my belongings methodically while trying not to cry. Family photo. Dead plant I'd never managed to keep alive. The Employee of the Month plaque from 3 years ago, before Devin became department head. I wrapped it all in the free tote bag they'd given us at last year's holiday party and walked out without saying goodbye to anyone. It wasn't until I got home that I finally broke down, sliding down against my apartment door, sobbing until my throat was raw. That was 6 months ago. But I guess I should properly introduce myself before I go any further. Hi, I'm Anakar Patel, 29 years old, and until recently, I was what most people would call a doormat. Quiet, agreeable. The person who apologizes when someone else bumps into her. The person who lets others talk over her in meetings, who accepts the blame for things that aren't her fault, who stays silent when she should speak up. If you're watching this, you probably found me through the algorithm. And honestly, I never thought I'd be the kind of person making videos like this, but some stories need to be told, and maybe mine will help someone else who's going through something similar. If you're enjoying this so far, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. Comment where you're watching from. And if you've ever experienced workplace bullying or discrimination, share your story below. I read every comment, and sometimes it helps just knowing you're not alone. Anyway, after I got fired, I spent 2 weeks in a depression haze. Didn't shower, barely ate, ignored calls from my parents back in Michigan. I'd always been the successful one they bragged about to relatives. How could I tell them I'd failed? It was during this time that I found out through a former coworker that Devin had already hired my replacement before firing me, Marissa Chan. I didn't know her, but I immediately stalked her on social media. She was gorgeous, outgoing, the kind of woman who had pictures of herself laughing at rooftop parties and charity galas. Everything I wasn't. But here's the thing about quiet people that extroverts never seem to understand. We notice everything. We see patterns others miss. We hear things we're not supposed to hear because people forget we're in the room. And over 5 years at that company, I'd noticed and heard a lot. 3 weeks after I got fired, I started looking for a new job. Not because I was ready, but because my savings wouldn't last forever. I updated my resume, applied to 17 positions, and got exactly 0 responses. That's when I realized Devin had blacklisted me. In our industry, everyone knows everyone, especially in this city. One bad word from a former manager can sink your entire career. I found out later he'd been telling people I was difficult to work with and couldn't handle pressure, the exact opposite of the truth. But who would believe the shy girl over the charismatic manager? That's when something inside me changed. It wasn't a dramatic moment. No screaming or throwing things. It was quieter than that, colder, like a switch flipping off. I decided Devin Rotas wasn't going to get away with ruining my life. But I needed to be smart about this. He was untouchable within the company, the CEO's golden boy, always exceeding targets, always the life of company events. He'd recently been featured in a business magazine as a rising star under 40. His future was bright. Mine wasn't even visible anymore. So I started planning. Remember how I said quiet people notice things? Over my 5 years at the company, I'd compiled what I called my CYA file, Cover Your Ass. It contained emails, screenshots, and notes from meetings where I'd contributed ideas that others, mostly Devin, had taken credit for. I'd never intended to use it. It was just my way of reminding myself I wasn't crazy when I felt invisible. But now it became the foundation of my plan. First, I needed to understand exactly how Devin operated. So I reached out to Marissa, my replacement, pretending I wanted to meet for coffee to help her transition into the role. Surprisingly, she agreed. "I just want to thank you for reaching out," Marissa said when we met at a cafe 3 blocks from the office. "No one at the company has been particularly helpful, especially Devin. That caught my attention." "Oh, I thought he was the one who hired you." She stirred her latte uncomfortably. "He did, but I don't know. Something feels off. He takes credit for my work, makes inappropriate comments sometimes. Last week, he told the executive team that my quarterly strategy was his idea." I nodded sympathetically while feeling a strange satisfaction. So Devin's pattern continued. "Has he asked you to stay late to help with the Henderson account yet?" I asked casually. Her eyes widened. "Yes. How did you know?" "Just a hunch." The Henderson account was Devin's favorite excuse to get female employees alone after hours. Nothing explicitly inappropriate ever happened. He was too smart for that. But there were always uncomfortable comments, standing too close, accidental touches. After meeting with Marissa, I connected with 3 other women who'd worked under Devin before me. They all had similar stories. None of it was quite harassment by legal standards, but together it painted a clear picture of a man who systematically undermined women while promoting himself. But that wouldn't be enough to bring him down. I needed more. My breakthrough came when I was going through old team emails and noticed something strange about the quarterly reports Devin submitted. The numbers didn't match our department's actual performance. At first, I thought I was missing something. Surely, he wouldn't be foolish enough to falsify financial data. But as I dug deeper, comparing the raw data I'd saved from our tracking systems with the numbers in his presentations, a pattern emerged. Devin had been systematically inflating results by 15 to 20% for at least 3 years. That's how he always exceeded targets. That's why he was the golden boy. It wasn't just unethical. It was illegal. And I had proof. But I couldn't just send this information to the executives or HR. Devin had too many allies in the company. I needed leverage. I needed to make sure when I took my shot, it wouldn't miss. So I did something I never thought I was capable of. I created a fake profile on a professional networking site and reached out to Devin's biggest competitor, a rising executive at another major company in our industry. We arranged to meet, and I brought copies of everything I had. "Why are you showing me this?" Camden Alvarez asked, leafing through my documentation with growing interest. "Because I want a job," I said simply. "A good one with your company." He laughed. "And if I say no, then I take this to 3 other companies. Or maybe the industry watchdog, or perhaps the business journal that just featured Devin as a rising star." Camden studied me with new respect. "You don't seem like the blackmailing type." "I'm not," I said honestly. "But I'm also not the type who just let someone destroy her career and get away with it." We came to an arrangement. I would get a position at Camden's company, a good position with better pay than I'd had before. And in exchange, his company would use my information to quietly pressure my former employer into a disadvantageous partnership deal. But that wasn't enough for me. Devin needed to face consequences personally. The company's annual leadership retreat was coming up. It was the highlight of Devin's year, a chance to network with executives, show off his achievements, and position himself for promotion. This year it was being held at a mountain resort 3 hours outside the city. I knew Devin would be preparing a major presentation. He always did. It was his moment to shine. And thanks to my continued friendship with Marissa, I knew exactly what he was planning to present. My plan crystallized. The day before the retreat, I sent an anonymous email to every executive in the company, including the CEO, with detailed evidence of Devin's number manipulation over the years. I included before and after versions of reports, highlighted the discrepancies, and attached an audio recording I'd made during my last week at work. In the recording, I'd asked Devin about a discrepancy I'd noticed in the Henderson account numbers. His response was damning. Just round up like I showed you, an acre. No one checks these things that closely, and it makes the whole team look better. That I didn't stop there. As executives were digesting this information, I had arranged for something else, something that would ensure Devin couldn't talk his way out of this. Marissa had given me access to Devin's presentation for the retreat. The night before, I made a small but devastating edit. After his introduction slide, I inserted a new one containing screenshots of the falsified reports side by side with the real data along with a simple question. Why do these numbers never match, Devin? I knew his habit was to advance through his presentations without looking back at slides he'd already covered. He wouldn't see what was coming until it was too late. The next morning, as Devin stood confidently before the company's entire leadership team and began his presentation, I was sitting in Camden's office being introduced as the newest member of their executive strategy team. My phone buzzed with a text from Marissa. "OMG, you wouldn't believe what just happened." But I would because I had orchestrated every second of it. Devin's career imploded that day. The company launched a formal investigation, which quickly uncovered years of financial manipulation. He was fired publicly, his industry reputation shattered. The last I heard, he was working in a completely different field, starting over at entry level. As for me, I thrived at my new company. When Camden asked how I'd managed to compile such detailed evidence against Devin, I simply said, "I notice things others don't. That's my superpower." He laughed. "And here I was thinking you were too shy. That's the thing about being underestimated. When people dismiss you as too quiet, too shy, or too weak, they never see you coming. I've been at my new company for 3 months now. Last week, I passed Devin on the street. He was coming out of a coffee shop in a part of town I'd never seen him in before, far from the upscale neighborhood where he used to live. He was wearing khakis and a polo shirt with a company logo I didn't recognize. He looked tired. He didn't recognize me at first. When he did, he froze. I smiled, not smugly, just a small acknowledgement, and continued walking. In that moment, I realized something important. Revenge wasn't what healed me. It was reclaiming my power. It was refusing to be erased. You know what's funny? For so long, I thought being quiet was my weakness. It turns out it was my greatest strength. But I'm getting ahead of myself. That night, after seeing Devin on the street, I came home to a message request on social media from Marissa. We'd kept in loose contact after everything went down, but hadn't spoken in weeks. "Can we meet? There's something you should know." We arranged to meet at a small cafe the next day. When I arrived, Marissa looked different, more confident, her shoulders back, making eye contact with the barista as she ordered. Success looked good on her. "So," she said once we were seated, "I got promoted to Devin's old position." "Congratulations," I said, genuinely happy for her. "You deserve it." "That's not why I wanted to meet." She leaned forward. "The company is in trouble, Arner. Serious trouble. After Devin's creative accounting came to light, there's been an external audit. Turns out he wasn't the only one manipulating numbers." I felt a cold sensation spreading through my chest. The executives knew. Some of them, not all, but enough. She glanced around, then lowered her voice. "The CEO is stepping down next week. There's talk of criminal charges for some of the board members." I sat back, stunned. I'd wanted justice against Devon, but I never intended to take down an entire company. Hundreds of people worked there. Good people who had nothing to do with Devon's actions or the executives' cover-ups. I thought you should hear it from me, Marissa continued, especially since, well, there are rumors about how the information came to light. Your name has come up. My name, but I was careful. Not about the leak, about what happened to you. People are connecting dots. Several other former employees have come forward with similar stories about being pushed out for not fitting a certain mold. I stared into my coffee, watching the cream swirl in hypnotic patterns. I'd been so focused on Devon that I hadn't considered the larger picture. The problem wasn't just one bad manager. It was a culture that allowed people like him to thrive while discarding people like me. What are you going to do? I asked. Marissa straightened her spine. I'm going to try to save what's worth saving. The company's imploding, but our department is solid. I've been in talks with investors about spinning us off as a separate entity. We'd take our clients, our team, start fresh. That's ambitious. It is. She hesitated. And I could use someone with your analytical skills, someone who sees what others missed. I nearly choked on my coffee. You're offering me a job. I'm offering you a partnership. Equal stake, equal say. I've got the charisma. You've got the insight. Together, we'd be unstoppable. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. 6 months ago, I was crying on my apartment floor, believing my career was over. Now I had options. A good position with Camden or a partnership with Marissa. I'll need to think about it, I said, mind racing. Marissa nodded. Of course, but don't think too long. Things are moving quickly. When I got home that night, I had another surprise waiting. An email from Elise Jameson, the company's HR director, one of the few executives who always treated me with respect. And Yukikar, I think we both know you were behind what happened with Devon and the subsequent revelations. I'm not asking for confirmation. I'm reaching out because I'm assembling a team to rebuild after this crisis. We need someone with integrity and intelligence. Someone who stands up for what's right, even when it's difficult. Please call me if you're interested in discussing further. 3 job offers in 3 months after being unable to get a single interview. The irony wasn't lost on me. I called Camden that evening and explained the situation. Honestly, to my surprise, he wasn't angry. I knew you were special the moment you walked into my office with that file. He said, too special to stay in a supporting role forever. If you want to spread your wings, I won't hold you back. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about how everything had changed. Not just my circumstances, but me. The old Anaker would have accepted the first decent offer out of gratitude and fear. The new Anaker had options and wasn't afraid to consider them all. The next morning, I did something the old me would never have done. I called both Marissa and Elise and proposed a meeting with all 3 of us. We met at a hotel conference room I rented for the occasion. Professional neutral territory. When they arrived, both women were clearly surprised to see each other. Thank you both for coming, I said, gesturing to the seats I'd arranged. No power position at the head of the table. We sat in a triangle. Equals. I've been considering both of your generous offers, and I have a counter-proposal. I laid out my vision, a new consulting firm specializing in corporate culture transformation with the 3 of us as founding partners. Elise would bring her HR expertise and industry connections. Marissa would bring her client relationships and leadership skills. I would bring my analytical approach and, as I put it, my first-hand experience with what happens when corporate culture goes wrong. The company is beyond saving in its current form, I told Elise gently. But the lessons from its collapse are invaluable. We could help other organizations avoid the same fate. To Marissa, I said, your clients will need guidance through this transition anyway. Why not provide that guidance as part of a more comprehensive service? They both sat silently for a long moment. Then Elise smiled, the first genuine smile I'd seen from her in years. You really aren't the same person who left the company, are you? She said. No, I agreed. I'm not. Over the next 2 hours, we hashed out the beginnings of a business plan. By the time we left that conference room, Phoenix Consulting had 3 founding partners and a mission statement Rebuilding Corporate Culture from the Ashes of Toxic Leadership. That was 4 months ago. Today, Phoenix Consulting has 8 employees, 12 clients, and a waiting list. We specialize in helping companies identify and correct toxic patterns before they become systemic. We are particularly skilled at showing the financial benefits of inclusive leadership, speaking the language executives understand best. Profit. The day we signed our incorporation papers, I finally called my parents. I told them everything: the firing, the depression, the revenge, and now the rebirth. We always knew you had fire in you. My mother said, even when you were little, you never raised your voice, but you always found a way to stand your ground. It was the most validating thing she could have said. Last week, something unexpected happened. I received an email from Devin. I don't expect forgiveness, he wrote, but I want you to know that losing everything forced me to confront who I really was. I'm in therapy now. I'm learning to listen more than I speak. I'm trying to become someone my daughter can be proud of when she's old enough to understand. I didn't know he had a daughter. Somehow, in all my detailed observations of Devin over the years, I'd missed this fundamental fact about his life. It was a humbling reminder that even the most observant among us have blind spots. I didn't reply to his email. Some bridges stayed burned. But I did forward information about Phoenix Consulting's upcoming workshop on inclusive leadership to the company where he now works, not for his sake, but for his colleagues and maybe in some small way for his daughters. Yesterday, I gave my first public speech at an industry conference. The topic, the power of quiet leadership. 500 people sat silently as I described how traditional corporate environments often mistake loudness for competence, extroversion for leadership potential. The most powerful observations, I told them, often come from those who spend more time watching and listening than talking. The most effective leaders aren't always the ones commanding attention. They are the ones paying attention. As I looked out at the audience, I saw heads nod. I saw people who recognized themselves in my words. The quiet ones, the observers, the ones who'd been passed over and underestimated. After my speech, a line of people waited to talk to me. One young woman gripped my hand with tears in her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. I thought there was something wrong with me. "There's nothing wrong with you," I told her. "Your quietness is your superpower. Never let anyone convince you otherwise." Later that evening, Marissa, Elise, and I celebrated with dinner at a restaurant we could never have afforded 6 months ago. To Phoenix, Marissa toasted, raising her glass. To rising from the ashes, Elise added, I raised my glass and met their eyes. To the quiet ones, I said, may we continue to shock everyone, including ourselves. Because that's the thing about revenge, isn't it? The best kind doesn't just hurt the person who hurt you. The best kind transforms you into someone stronger, someone they never saw coming, someone even you didn't know you could be. My revenge against Devin didn't end with his humiliation and firing. It evolved into something much more powerful. The creation of a business dedicated to preventing what happened to me from happening to others. Every company we transform, every toxic leader we help replace, every quiet voice we amplify, that's my real revenge. Not against one man, but against a system that enables people like him while silencing people like me. This morning, I received an email from a major business publication. They want to feature Phoenix Consulting in an article about innovative approaches to corporate culture. The irony isn't lost on me. Less than a year ago, they were featuring Devin as a rising star. I forwarded the email to my partners with a simple message: our turn to shine. So that's my story. From being fired for being too shy to founding a successful company that celebrates the power of quiet observation. From packing my belongings into a tote bag and crying on my apartment floor to helping reshape how companies think about leadership. I still consider myself quiet. I still prefer listening to talking. I still notice things others miss. But I've learned that being quiet doesn't mean being powerless. Sometimes it means you're gathering your strength, biding your time, seeing what others can't see. Sometimes it means you're the most dangerous person in the room. If you've stuck with me through this whole story, thank you. I hope it resonates with some of you who felt overlooked or underestimated. Remember that your perceived weaknesses often contain your greatest strengths. You just need to recognize them. If my story meant something to you, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. I'd love to hear your experiences in the comments. Times when you were underestimated, how you handled it, what you learned. Maybe you're still in that painful place I was in 6 months ago, or maybe you've already found your phoenix moment. Either way, sharing our stories helps others feel less alone. And if you know someone who needs to hear this, someone who's being underestimated or pushed aside for being too anything, please share this video with them. Sometimes all we need is to know that transformation is possible, that the fire that feels like it's destroying us can actually be the one that forges us into something stronger. Until next time, this is Anika Patel reminding you that the quietest voice in the room might just have the most powerful things to say. I invite you to subscribe to the Azad Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and support me further by hitting the hype button so the story in this video can be heard by many more people. Thanks to all.